Hi, everybody. All right, imagine this. You've been at the Comic-Con. You've had like 6 donuts and a little bit too much coffee. You're a little bit wired, and you're sick of like being in the armpits of nerds. That's where you're at. So you've found your way into a room somewhere, a weird room off to the side, and there's a panel going on. And you sit down, you make a like shuffly sound with the chair, and you just take a breath. Suddenly, you're watching a panel. This is the panel. It's the Underground Comics panel at the Kapow Online Comics Show. My name is Pat Grant. For some reason, I've been roped into hosting this excellent panel, but I'm going to do my best. I'm a comic book artist. I'm a writer. I have a graphic novel that's on its way to Australia on a very slow boat, and you'll be able to buy it soon. It's called The Grot. But you're not here just to hear from me. You're here to hear from a fantastic cartoonist called Claudia Chinyere Akole. You there,
Hello,
Claude?
I'm here.
Hi, Claude. Claudia,
Hello,
where are you?
I am in Sydney, Australia, inside my bedroom, in this very dark and hobbit-like abode.
Claudia is Claudia's really making some waves. You're an ascendant cartoonist. That's how I would describe you at the moment. She's trained in animation, but producing some really interesting comics at the moment. You're the guest artist at Short Run Comics Festival in Seattle. Is that right?
COVID's cancelled everything.
For the ill-fated 2020 edition.
Ill-fated 2020 edition.
I tell you, Claude, that is not nothing. That's a great sort of a great example of your ascendance as an Australian cartoonist at the moment. And you've just been popping off on the internet, right? With your new book, which is hang on, I'm going to get it right. Why Black Lives Matter resonates with Black people all over the world.
Hey, you got it.
To Australians, which you can read online right now, but you should also buy the hard copy, which will come to you in the mail very promptly, I might add, and has a delightful smell. And
worth noting, the printed zines are charity zines, so I'll be donating 60% of the profits to Aboriginal Legal Service here in Australia for New South Wales and ACT, and splitting it as a split bail funds, mutual aid funds, community organization funds in the USA.
Awesome. So go find the comic, have a look at it while you're listening to us, buy the zine, and then look, we're already plugging, aren't we? Why don't we?
We're plugging too much.
The second artist we have is Safdar Ahmed. Where are you, Safdar? Are you there?
Hi. Yes.
Hey, already?
Hi. Nice to see you.
How the hell are you, man?
I'm good. I'm beaming in from the Refugee Art Project studio in Ashfield, in Sydney, wow, which is the traditional land of the Gadigal and Wongal people of the Eora Nation.
Awesome. And you've got a comic book coming out soon, which is Still Alive.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's coming out 12 panel press very soon, right?
Yeah, that's right. Those aren't pictures from the comic. But yeah, I'm excited about it. It's a big graphic novel, a sort of 200-page non-fiction kind of documentary type graphic novel based on my 10 years of experience volunteering and doing art workshops with people from an asylum seeker and refugee background. And it's coming out with 12 panels press in April next year. So yeah, finishing up now and hoping it'll, do well, fingers crossed.
Great. And we've got a fourth artist who is Sarah Firth, a fourth genius.
Hello.
Sarah Firth is a graphic recorder and a notorious divergent thinker amazing an amazing brain who's also working on a graphic novel as well. But today, are we going to be talking to you, Sarah? Or are you just going to be like chilling and drawing our conversation?
I'm going to be working away in the background, making a graphic recording. Yeah.
So she's a ghost.
I'm a ghost.
But yeah, so Sarah will be making a sort of sketchnoting, making a graphic recording of our conversation today. So hi guys, thanks for coming to hang out. Thanks to Nathaniel for organising this event. There's a little bit of housekeeping as per any public event. First of all, I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Gadigal people. We're all in Sydney. I'm at UTS, so I'm on Gadigal country. Safdar and Claudia are on Gadigal and
Wongal country.
Wongal country, okay. Yeah. And so we wish to acknowledge we're here on Indigenous land. The sovereignty was never ceded. And can we just take maybe 30 seconds to just think about where we are right now? What's beneath the concrete beneath our feet? Okay, there's a second piece of housekeeping we have to do, because this isn't just an opportunity for us to gas bag, maybe plug our comics, and this isn't just an opportunity for the audiences all over Australia and the world to like hear about Australian comics, but this is a fundraising event as well. So the Comic-Con that we're a part of is in service of a charity called Half Cut, which is sort of running a campaign to sort of protect the half of the world's forests that haven't been cut down. So at the moment, it's particularly this charity is particularly important because there's a section of the Daintree called Lot 155. Which Half Cut is really working hard to protect and to hand back to the traditional owners. So part of the Half Cut, the way they're doing it is kind of like Movember, if I understand it correctly, and they're getting people to sort of like kind of mangle themselves, right? Kind of like maybe cut half of their hair off, or maybe cut half of their facial hair off, or maybe I think the way I would do it would be a full half chest hair job. I reckon that would be appropriate for me. But if you want to participate, you don't have to cut your hair. You could maybe perhaps braid half your hair. You could maybe perhaps do like a half dye job. You could look like Nathaniel. I didn't even notice. Look, Nathaniel. Can you do a two-faced? Can you do a two-faced turn for us?
Hey, that's a regular clean-shaven guy. Whoa, that's totally different.
But you don't have to be as extreme as Nathaniel. But for more information, you could go visit halfcut.org or click the link in the video. And there's a graphic crawl at the bottom of your screen if you want a little reminder about that. Okay. Underground comics.
Underground comics.
So that's the title of our panel, and we had a bit of a discussion about what underground comics mean, and I had some thoughts about it this morning. I think perhaps if you were to ask an American comic scholar what underground comics mean, they would immediately say something to the tune of, well, underground comics was a comics movement that was informed by the EC comics of the 1950s. But also the countercultural movement of the 1960s. It's the key artists are Robert Crumb, Art Spiegelman, Gilbert Shelton, S. Clay Wilson. So that's a sort of an established part of comics history, is this underground comics movement. And then it sort of moved on to the that this informed like a big alt comics boom in the 90s, which a lot of people of my generation would perhaps say they were a part of. You know, they say they make alternative comics, but then it's kind of like this kind of thing that changed in the 60s when underground comics emerged is a continuous line to today. And I feel that all three of us are participating in that. All four of us, in fact, are participating in this tradition that we could rightly call underground comics. But what do you guys think? How would you describe? Do you think you guys are part of an underground comics movement?
I'd say like yes, absolutely. But on the note of thinking about underground comics as a movement that's been expanding, I think more accurately, it's probably a case where storytelling is something that is so innate to human beings. And I think it's a part of how we've been connecting with each other for a long time. And I think comics as a medium is a bit of an extension of that. So I suppose underground comics is kind of a version of creating comics where there aren't, like, we're not really adhering to a structure of what can be published, and we're not adhering to like lines at what kind of stories we can tell and who we can tell them for and who we can tell them about. So yeah, I definitely think I'm partaking in underground comics, but I think any person expressing individual stories in the format of comics is underground comics. Like it's a big one.
What about you?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think as for what comics were, I think the underground movement that people associate with the 60s counterculture was very important, because that was when comics, I guess, were certainly expanded, you know, into a range of kind of experimental areas. There was the trippy LSD inspired kind of free association that came into comics. There was the more autobiographical, you know, self-revealing stuff, which hadn't been done, I think, as much beforehand. And then you also had women's comics and feminist comics and a whole bunch of other things coming in under that umbrella. So I guess we are, in a way, you know, indebted to some of the new things that movement brought. But I'd also agree that the term's a bit problematic, because obviously we've moved on from someone like Robert Crumb, who I think is very much a part of that 60s counterculture. And I think comics have changed a lot these days. And so now I would think of it more generally as alternative comics, in which there is this scope to kind of be very creative and tell different types of stories.
So I kind of feel like one of the tensions, one of the tensions that was at play in the 60s and say in the 90s alt comics explosion, and if we went over to France and we looked at L'Association and all of this, or the Oulipo movement, or if we look at those sort of like alternative Japanese comics, is a kind of like is a really clear statements about from a group of artists who are saying no, we're sort of we're pushing against the mainstream of what's going on in this culture, and so it's funny because I still feel like when people ask me when people ask me what I do and I say, oh, I'm a comic book artist, still the first thing they ask is, oh, do you do like sort of like genre material? Do you do sort of superhero stuff, or and do you do stuff for kids? So I kind of have to sort of say, well, it's not quite like that. I'm actually trying to do something that's really going along a very different path and deals with sort of darker, more complicated, more issues that are more sort of associated with my autobiographical experience. And for both of you, I think that would the kind of the infusion of the infusion of autobiographical autobiographical storytelling with kind of like fantastical or powerful sort of graphic ideas seem to be like a central part of your practice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you were saying about people misunderstanding what you do when you mention that you're a comic artist is probably kind of a huge, broad issue that everyone has when they work in this medium, is that there's a general misunderstanding that it's a medium and it's not a genre. Like comic isn't a specific thing. And so one thing that I love about comics, and is why I always come back to them as like a point of sharing autobiographical stories, is because almost anything can be a comic. Like if you've got pictures and if you've got text, it can be a comic. So there isn't really a set structure in the medium, but there's this like really heavy misunderstanding about what a comic can be and what a comic is as far as genre goes. But yeah, for my own work, I definitely feel like having an opportunity to have this sort of medium where anything can be depicted as a story, and there are so many rules that you can break and adhere to kind of break away from being strictly realistic. It's a really just wonderful way to tell stories that may not be told by other people and give perspective to things that I personally don't see reflected in more mainstream understandings of storytelling and media. So, yeah, I don't know how to end my sentence.
I'll pick up. I thought that's exactly right. I think that in a way the genre thing is interesting because so much of what people think about comics is obviously defined by the mainstream and the superhero format. And I love that format too. I sort of grew up, I think, reading Spider-Man and learned the language of comics through superhero comics, in a sense, when I was a kid. But at the same time, I find it quite exciting that there is so much scope for, you know, new forms and pushing into kind of places that you haven't been before. Like when I'm doing comics, I guess most creative people feel this way, but I feel like I'm pushing into some new kind of terrain, and it's always exciting and feels sort of, yeah, it's I'm not really making much sense. Anyway, I guess I just love the visceral thrill of doing a comic that I want to read, which I don't think is out there so much, you know, and that's why drawing from personal experience is a good thing as well, I think.
So Safdar, you've got a kind of, you know, you're talking about like going into new territory, and I've read your book, Still Alive. Maybe not the final version, but I've read an earlier version. And one of the innovations I thought that you brought to kind of autobiographical comics was this this kind of like you're telling stories about like this cold, hard reality of Australian politics and presenting these sort of these sparse bureaucratic landscapes in these detention centers. But then you're really interested in heavy metal. So there's this sort of extreme metal imagery that sort of infuses, which really activates the horror of the real life situations that you're exploring. Is that conscious, or is that something that that came from your, you know, from subconsciously from your drawing practice?
Tough one to answer. I think a bit of both. I think in a way, horror as a genre is a good way of tackling things that are otherwise hard to wrap our brains around. So when I thought about how to represent detention, it didn't seem enough just to try and show this very cold, kind of stale environment where people are essentially warehoused for years on end and given no news about their future, and they lose hope, and there's this terrible mental health crisis in Australian detention centres, which has been going on for decades, which has been a well-known consequence of locking people up indefinitely. So it's already a horrific and kind of very cruel sort of environment to enter. for anyone who's unlucky enough to be detained. But then I thought, well, how as an artist do I represent that? And I think putting it into the language of horror and the sort of heavy metal aesthetic is what sort of comes naturally to me, because those are the, some of the art forms that I really love and want to express myself through. So yeah, it's a tough one. I think maybe if I'd gone for a more kind of representational way of drawing and just show the environment, to me, something would be lacking. It wouldn't be fully expressing in an imaginative way the kind of awfulness of that place, if that makes sense.
So one of my favorite of your drawings, Safdar, is in your autobiographical comic about Crohn's disease, and there's this excellent drawing of a body in agony, twisted in half, and like this marvelous sort of jet of liquid shit coming out of the and that's like that book really like was really about you. In my understanding of it, is you're explaining a disease, but you're also explaining the physical like experience of, you're using visual language to explain what it actually feels like to have like an attack of Crohn's disease. And that's something that I think, comics, especially the kind of sort of the kind of comics that all three of us work on do really well. They kind of like speak to these unspeakable physical realities. And so Claude, just the other thing I was thinking about with you and your ability to do this is you've got this great ability to draw nuanced emotion, right? Like you can in the way you move a pen, like a pink Posca, for example, on some brown paper, you can communicate like a very, very specific kind of anxiety or a kind of like a mental process at play that is really felt in your body. And since, I remember one of the first times I met you and we had a really good chat, you were talking about the feeling of depression, and the way you described it was like, it was a feeling of anxiety, and the way you described it was like being filled up from the toes by a black ink, an infinitely black ink. And ever since I heard that, I've noticed that's a huge talent of yours in your work. How do you find that? Like do you do sketches, and do you iterate to find these visual metaphors for emotion, or does it?
Not at all. It's definitely really it's not about finding them. It's more like I'm in my own head fighting them with a stick every day of my life. And so the process of putting it down on paper is almost like opening a tap. It's like I've been thinking in circles about this sensation that's been going on in like my mind and my body. So visualizing it is relatively easy because I've already been visualizing it mentally. And then that's coupled with the fact that one of the biggest parts of my practice is that I love working by hand and doing things with just a marker on a paper, because there isn't really anything else that can really equal the feeling of just making a physical drawing on a piece of paper and creating something that wasn't there before. So a lot of my practice is about, one, trying to like explain these emotional things that I've experienced or had going on in my life, or it's in real time and it's something that I'm experiencing at the moment and kind of want to let out of my own head by putting it onto a piece of paper. So it's definitely not the kind of thing that's like, not the kind of thing that you could like practice to achieve. It really is just, opening a tap, opening the dam.
Did you ever draw something that you wish you could undraw?
No, not really. Not really, not at all. I think going back to what Safdar was saying earlier about while you're creating a comic, you feel like you're really, pushing something forward, and you feel like you're achieving something while you're doing it. I kind of have an opposite back and forth with myself, where while I'm making a comic, I am constantly going back and forth in an argument with myself, like, who the fuck's gonna read this? Like, who cares? And then the other part of me is like, no, just do it. Just like stick it out and wait until the end. And maybe someone out there will actually enjoy reading this or learn something from this. But yeah, it's a constant back and forth.
What about you, Safdar? Have you got a drawing that horrifies you and you wish you could undraw?
Yeah, I think so. Probably, in a way, it's the comic you mentioned before, the one about Crohn's disease. That was for me, I guess, the most difficult one to do, because I felt like I was, drawing from some very personal kind of medical experiences that I've had, and they're frankly embarrassing. I mean, Crohn's disease is it's a autoimmune illness which attacks the gut and can create internal injuries and all kinds of awful things. And so I was dealing with a very shitty illness and talking about my experiences of that. And that's pretty embarrassing. And so that's a comic which I'm still anxious to show people or talk about. I didn't put it online because I didn't want anyone to just Google me and find it, find out about everything that's inside it. And even though I did it a few years ago, I'm still quite painfully anxious when I'm in the same room as someone looking at it. So I'm so glad I put it in a comic. And going back to what you were saying, I think for me, there is a very visceral, tactile element to drawing. I love drawing with ink on paper, and that kind of translates into these very tactile bodily experiences. Long story short, I am a bit embarrassed about it. I wouldn't take it back, but I still squirm when people look at it.
It sounds like the mortifying ordeal of being known, which I always hit walls with, where I'm always a bit afraid that, like, I feel like I'd like to be a very invisible person, but then at the same time, I feel driven to create the content in comics that I make. So yeah, it's really this awful marriage between not wanting to show so much of yourself to other people, but feeling like there's not really any genuine way to create work without doing so. The mortifying ordeal of being known.
So I think that if you're going to take storytelling seriously, you have to be willing to expose some kind of raw nerve, and I kind of vaguely knew that when I was sort of getting started myself in autobiographical storytelling. But I've seen it. But now that I'm a bit older, I've kind of I've sort of fallen into a role of mentor for like a bunch of younger artists who are sort of, they arrive in my life and they're like, oh, I've got a story to tell. I've got this story to get out of me. And then in the telling, that story exposes a kind of rawness or a new truth in their life. And it's mind-blowingly terrifying and really, really difficult. And I mean, I kind of told a fairly revealing autobiographical story about my family called Told Me in a Video some years ago. There was fallout from it, but there was also it also made me feel so vulnerable that I went off and did a genre piece. I was like, okay, next thing,
never again.
Me airing my dirty laundry in public, okay? Please, no, like it's gonna be a genre romp, and that book, the genre romp, contains the one drawing that I wish I could undraw. And
which is that?
It's a drawing of my son Lenny as a street child, and so the problem with doing a story set in an overcrowded city like my book The Grot is you've just got these crowd scenes that you've got to populate. So there's there's like 30 people riding bikes. Every time you draw someone in the crowd, you're like, oh fuck. Like I can't just make it up. You can't make these people. You have to base them on real people. So everybody's based on somebody you saw or somebody you know. And there was this one scene where some homeless kids who just were stealing some fruit. There were these, and I drew a picture of my son Lenny, and he's got like weird fungus growing on his butt, and he's sort of like starving, and he's trying to get a piece of, just trying to get his breakfast, and it just fills me with horror, because suddenly I'm looking at a piece of like climate fiction with my child, like suffering. And I didn't think about that when I was doing it. I was just like, oh, I need to draw a 1-year-old, so I'll just draw my son. Yeah, I think that might be part of what underground comics might mean now is its capacity to speak to those hard or those raw truths that are presented by everyday life.
I think a big thing that I've learned the older I get is that stories are such a huge window into empathy for other people, and for coming to understand situations that you're not organically exposed to yourself. So it's really hard wanting to see like genuine representations of perspectives you might have or perspectives that you've seen in your life, but someone has to do the dirty work. Like someone has to be genuine in order for that to exist in the first place. So I suppose part of my frustration is I don't want to be that person, but I've ended up being that person. Like I have to air out my dirty laundry if I want to make a point. And it pains me that that's the way it is, but I know that's the way that people relate. And I know that's the way that people come to understand things that might be difficult for them to understand otherwise. So yeah, shame about Lenny though.
So what about? Do you feel the same way, Safdar? Like if story is an empathy machine, right? Do you feel, and like Claude just kind of spoke to this, to like almost like storytelling as an act of service. You're enabling empathy on a mass scale by making one piece of artwork, and your work really does have a sense of an intent for service in my mind, because you're telling the stories of refugees. Does that ring true to you?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing I try to say in the graphic novel, Still Alive, is on one hand, revealing yourself creatively can be terrifying. Sure, it can be, genuinely scary to sort of know that people are going to learn all these things about you. But on the other hand, I see it as a good process, in a way, my own way of coming to terms with things. I think storytelling is a good way of coping with trauma, but not in some sort of didactic or medical model. And by that, I mean, you can sort of deal with very personal things, and by expressing it creatively, you sort of externalize it, and you do it on your own terms and in your own way, and that can create a safe distance between you and that experience. And so, I think storytelling can actually help people on a personal level in that respect. And I think certainly sharing difficult stories helps society more generally. And it is that thing of, I guess, every artist feels this deep urge to create something and change the way people think about it or change the way they feel about it. So for me, it has that very positive aspect. And to go back briefly to your comic, Pat, I loved Tormina Video. That one kind of inspired me to do my comic about my dad called The Good Son.
I remember that was when I first met you. Was that?
Yeah, I think that was our first conversation. Yeah. And you asked me something like, "Oh, was your dad a screw up?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, a real." And And so that was good. Like, it was a good chance to talk about a very sort of something that was kind of really eating at me, which I really wanted to get at, which was the issue of, you know, having an angry father, but also the fact that families hide things. Families hide issues of abuse. They hide the difficult things and sweep it under the rug and pretend it's not, you know, that they're fine. And society does that more generally. And I felt like, well, no one's going to talk about family violence or that sort of thing unless you actually tell those stories in a really brutal way and just say, well, there's the reality, you know, deal with it. And so at that point in my life, I really wanted to do this story about, you know, having a father with a big temper who kind of terrorized us a little bit when we were young. Although we're on better terms now, I have to say. So, yeah, long story short, I think, yes, telling stories is hard, but I like to think that it improves, you know, me and society more generally to kind of deal and confront these difficult things.
I think we've found an alternate title for our panel now. We've gone from underground comics to telling difficult stories, which is something that I think we're all really trying to learn how to do.
Mm.
Hey, what do you think the price is? What do you think the price you pay for autobiographical storytelling is? And is there ever an occasion where that price is too high?
I think the price, depending on the story. So like you two were talking about, making stories that are really explicit in your experiences with your family. The immediate price would be straining your relationship with your family. And I've had like plenty of personal stories that I've wanted to write, but there's always that thought in the back of my head of what about the people in my life who will be represented by this work that I'm putting out in the world? And then more broadly, how about myself that I'm always representing in the work that I put out into the world? I guess the price is being misunderstood, which is unfortunate because it's an exercise in trying to make yourself more understood by writing personal stories in the first place. That's a hard one, real hard one.
Yeah.
I have a thing. I have a thing which is a real price that I feel like I pay for my autobiographical storytelling. I think neurological scientists, when they talk about memory, they talk about memory being like a groove in a record that gets reinscribed every time you remember. And when I do a kind of remembering that involves drawing, I delete my raw memory, or I delete an experiential memory, and that gets replaced with a drawing. And so now, if I think about all of the moments in my life that I've thought were important enough to turn into some sort of autobiographical story, then like I haven't got visual memories of that time, or scent memories or sound memories. All I've got is my drawing that I made. So I'm like, while I'm creating something from nothing, which is making making ink marks, a beautiful drawing on a blank piece of page, I'm sort of deleting something as well, and that's a bit scary to me. That, like, I feel like that can be a real that makes me nervous about drawing pictures of my children, for example, and like memories, recent memories that are cherished. I'm reluctant to turn those into any kind of text. Do you guys have that experience? Is that?
Yeah, I kind of get that as well. Like when you put something on paper in this like one version that you've drawn. Yeah, I feel like I've never had the words to describe it, but yeah, it definitely seems like you are deleting the physical memory and like you're turning it into this thing that's separate from you from now on. Yeah, I definitely have similar fears. I guess I just never had the language to kind of explain it that way.
Yeah.
I'd have to think about that. But off the bat, I'd say no, I don't think I get that. I think I see the comic as sort of augmenting the real memory, but not in any way deleting it or replacing it. It's still there in its sort of, essence. But that's an interesting one, because I think the whole subject of memory is so slippery, right? And our memories are changing through our lives anyway, depending on where we stand when we look back at them. So I think maybe the comic does change your relationship to the past when you do it about the past.
We should invite Sarah into the conversation really quickly. So viewers might have noticed that she's here drawing what's happening while we're talking. So Sarah has several superpowers, but the one she's using right now is this ability to catch events and ideas while they're happening. And this is called graphic recording, right, Sarah? And this is what you do for a job.
Yes. And you can call it graphic recording or sketchnoting or live illustrations or a bunch of stuff, but it's basically listening to conversation the same way like an Auslan interpreter or a translator would listen to conversation. But I am sort of weaving a narrative with pictures and words, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of listening for salient sort of memory joggers, visual cues that you all verbalize, important things like the titles of your books. Yeah.
And you're one of the best, the most prolific journalers that I've ever met in my life. I've seen you fill up a sketchbook in a week or 2 weeks. What's your relationship between drawing and memory? Do you feel like your memory is enriched by drawing, or like me?
Well, I'm a funny case, because firstly I'm neurodivergent, so I kind of need to channel hyperactivity through drawing. Like that's how I listen. Otherwise, I just I'm like a kitten looking over here. But also for me, I actually got an acquired brain injury back in 2008 from a car accident, and I lost my short-term memory and actually had to basically use Post-it notes to help me remember and understand. And so the kinesthetic thing of drawing and writing, whether that's just in a journal or making a comic, is actually a fundamental part of me using my brain. So I'm kind of like an ultimate cyborg, which is I need to have all these kind of tools to help me manage my strange brain, if that makes sense. So yeah. I do that stuff out of necessity as opposed to for fun, though it's both, Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That is fascinating. So I guess like what we can take from that is like our brains are all just so wildly different. And it's funny, Claude, because you know how you described autobiographical storytelling as turning on a tap, and this there's like a release or a kind of like catharsis. That's not my experience at all. My experience is I only think I'm capable of telling a story about something that happened in my life on the other side of it being processed. Like it has to be over. It has to be something that I've got some kind of what's it called? Some sense of completion. And then instead of turning it on a tap, it's like doing a jigsaw puzzle and making drawings and images and turns of phrase and structuring sentences and elements of story in a way that shows how all these different things connect together. And then that becomes like a solid ball of story and memory all woven together. And then I can just go, here you go, to an audience and give it that. So instead of it being a cathartic experience, it's this like incredibly tedious like assembly project.
Well, it definitely varies for me. Like I wouldn't say the tap opening is all of it. I think I'm kind of similar to Sarah in that drawing is such an integral part of existing for me. It's something I've been doing since I was born. So when it comes to processing my own emotions, opening the tap is a big way that I do that with, say, journal comics or something. But for something that isn't just strictly about me or my own feelings or my own thoughts, like the most recent comic I did, there definitely is a lot of that assemblage that goes on. And this was taking like the past 8 years of sitting by and watching like these kind of developments in Black civil rights and like anti-racism activism across the world, and not having the language to show other people every single little piece that I've seen and every single little piece that I understand within this context. So there's definitely a little bit about, like, there's definitely a bit of jigsawing when it comes to stories that aren't just strictly about myself. The tap, I'd say, is definitely when it comes to I don't know how to like process or describe a feeling that I'm having, so I need to draw it or I need to write it.
Awesome. Safdar, what about you? Do you feel like you have to process things before you can tell them into stories, or is storytelling the way that you process them? Kind of already.
Yeah, I'm a tap turner. I think that telling the story is how I try and come to terms with it. Definitely. Yeah, often it's quite cathartic if it's about me. If it's, you know, like when I do my autobio stuff, I feel like that's what it is. It's the old pressure cooker. It's just you're taking the lid off, you know. But also I think there's I really love Claudia's Black Lives Matter comic in the way that it combines you know, a lot of information and synthesizes that, and then also within the context of personal narrative and memory and what it means, you know, to you. So I think there's a lot to be said for that as well. And I've tried to do that with Still Alive, because obviously they aren't my stories that I'm representing. The comic's not about me. It's about how Australia treats asylum seekers and refugees. And so I felt a certain responsibility of representing other people's narratives, albeit in collaboration with them, and they're good friends of mine. But at the same time, yeah, when you're dealing with a big issue, I think there's a lot to be said for bringing research and some way of, you know, helping people understand that issue, but also giving it that personal connection, because none of us are truly objective. We all relate to issues, you know, through our experience at the same time. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we better wrap up, guys. There's the audience members are getting up off their blue plastic chairs, and they're picking their undies out of their butts because they're ready to go back into the convention and spend a bunch of money on Australian comics, and also buy some weird plastic dolls and patches that infringe intellectual property laws. So I'll just remind everyone that this is a fundraiser event for Half Cut. So check out halfcut.org for if you want to support or participate in this project. You don't have to shave half of your face or your head, but we'd love it.
But it's encouraged.
We'd love it if you did. So I would like to say you can thank Claudia.
Thank you.
She may describe herself as having a resting bitch face, but really underneath she is a ball of pink quivering lines tangled together. And
truly.
And Safdar Ahmed, thank you, Safdar Ahmed.
Thank you. Been a pleasure.
He may seem like a lovable, huggable gentleman, but really he is the most terrifying person in the Australian Turkish death metal scene.
Thank you.
I don't have one prepared for you. I don't have one of these. But
someone hire this man to give eulogies.
Sarah Firth, she may seem like a consummate professional, but actually she's a fantastic weightlifter, and she goes out during lockdown stealing children to put them on the ends of bars so she can lift them up and put them down and send them back on their merry way. So beware if you're in a 5 kilometer radius. What have we got? Is it? So remember, go donate to Half Cut. Buy yourself a copy of Claudia. It was such a long name. I've forgotten.
I know. Why Black Lives Matter resonates with Black people all over the world. An open letter to Australians.
God, it's so good. It's so good. I've told you, we went for a bushwalk and I raved about it the whole time. But it's so good. You should be really proud of yourself.
Thank you. You're going to kill me with the.
Thank you. Safdar's book Still Alive is coming out through 12 Panels Press in a month.
April next year.
April next year. I heard you got some. I heard you got some big sales through the school system already. Congrats!
Yeah.
I got a direct line to your publisher, Safdar.
Yeah, that's the dream. Hopefully, it'll get in high schools. That would be great.
And Sarah Firth's amazing art can be found at sarahfirth.com. Is that right, Sarah?
Yeah, I'll also just be putting it on Instagram and Facebook and tagging. Yeah, so you'll find it.
But I want people to go and read your complexity comic. So they can find that on your website, Sarah Firth Creative Services. Google that. You can't miss it.
Yeah. Thanks, Pat.
And check out Kapow Comics for Sarah's graphic recording. I think it's time to say goodbye. And thanks to Nathaniel for organising this. Thanks to audience members for listening to it. Don't eat too much junk food. I know that the terrible novelists have like lollies at the table that you can pretend you're interested in their terrible novel and steal a handful. Don't do it. Go outside, eat some broccoli, take a break, and then come back inside, and you'll make better decisions about where to spend your money at this Australian Comics Convention. So that's my advice to you. See you guys. It's amazing.
Bye-bye.
See you. Thank you.